Washington mornings on the Mall. At AM 630.
It is 8:07 on WMAL, where Washington comes to talk. Brian Wilson, Brian Neiman. We are joined and happy to be joined by the governor of the Commonwealth of Virginia, Bob McDonnell. Thanks for coming in to join us this morning, Governor.
Thank you, Brian. Glad you got the Commonwealth right.
Yeah, we always call it the Commonwealth. We try to.
We've been chastised about that before.
That's right. Hey, listen, I want to start out by saying you were with Mitt Romney yesterday,
Yes.
out doing some campaigning in the Commonwealth. How did that go?
We're delighted to have Governor Romney here. This is obviously a swing state. The president is here today. Mitt Romney will be down in Portsmouth this afternoon. We'll be doing some more. But this is a state that Mitt Romney can definitely win. It's gone Republican 44 years in a row. Until 2008, President Obama did a great job with an enthusiastic campaign and won Virginia. But we're convinced that based on the issues to the Virginia voters being important on taxes and spending and debt and veterans issues and jobs, that Romney's got the right message. So we're asking him to come here as often as possible.
Now, there is a poll out there that suggests there may be some heavy lifting in the Commonwealth, in that it's a Democratic poll, admittedly, but it has a pretty
very
good,
Democratic.
But it has a good track record. You have to admit that. In the past, it's been on the money.
Not in my race.
Oh, well, okay, fair enough. Fair enough. But it says that if the election were held today in the Commonwealth of Virginia, that Obama would win by 8 points.
Yeah, I don't buy that at this point. There are other polls, I think, that show at a margin of error race. But, Brian, I think here's what you got to remember is that the last year you've had Republicans fighting Republicans, and so those negatives gone up among Republican voters. Well, now, especially yesterday with Speaker Gingrich getting out, it's essentially Mitt Romney versus Barack Obama. Now when you compare the president's record with Romney's vision, I think this thing gets tighter, and I think among independent voters, Mitt Romney goes up.
I would not be doing my job if I didn't raise the question, and that is some people have talked about you as a possible running mate.
Did you start that rumor? I'm wondering where that's
yeah, well, it's me. It's me alone. But how, if that were to come down the pike, and if the governor were to call you, former governor, were to call you, how might you respond?
Well, I guess I should say I don't respond to hypothetical questions, but I mean just say, look, I'm going to help Mitt Romney any way that I can. I'm not looking for that call or expecting that call at all. We got a great deep bench around the country, but I do believe that Mitt Romney is the right guy at the right time. I mean, we have a failure of leadership and broken promises out of this administration, and an unemployment rate at 8%. And for the whole Obama presidency, that's unacceptable. Mitt Romney can do a lot better. So I'm going to help him any way he asks me to.
Has there been any discussion about that at all?
No.
Nothing.
Just in the press by other people, but there's only one list that matters.
We got to have something to do.
It's the governor's, but I'm campaigning with him when it comes to Virginia.
All right, you brought up the fact that Republicans have done very well in Virginia for quite some time.
Yes.
As well, Barack Obama. You have two Democrats right now in the Senate who
Yes.
are Democrats. You have been a very popular governor. It's very close between Tim Kaine and George Allen in that poll. So where do you see Virginia right now politically? Is it a blue state? Will it be a continuous swing state?
Oh, I think it's a swing state, Brian. But if you look at the last three cycles, since President Obama won with a well-run campaign in 2008, with about a 6% margin. I won the next year by 18. The following year, we pick up 3 new seats in the Congress, so it's 8 out of the 11 are Republicans in Congress. Then last year, we have the largest number of Republicans win in the House of Delegates in the history of the state. So I would say that the electorate is still right of center in Virginia. They're proving that at the polls. But it's going to be a spirited, close race. I just believe that the independent voters who control every election are so concerned about this crushing national debt at $16 trillion almost that President Obama's presided over, 8.2% unemployment rate. That's not acceptable. They think we can do better, and that's why I think they'll vote for Romney.
So the trend is right now in Virginia that your Republicans are doing better, for
Yes,
sure. So
absolutely.
that means that this is a state that Mitt Romney should win in 2012.
Should win, can win. But it's obviously the president's a good campaigner. He's a better campaigner, I believe, than he is a president. He's affable. He works hard. He raises a lot of money. And so I expected a spirited race. He's in Virginia today. He'll be there kicking off his campaign formally on Saturday. So we're not taking anything for granted. I think it's going to be a tough fight.
All right, let me get a couple of local issues. This voter ID bill is very
Yes.
it's a bill that passed. It's awaiting your signature. You have some reservations about it. What are your reservations about this
Well, first,
bill?
it's not really a voter ID bill. We already have a voter ID law. There's a great misconception that you're already required to bring an ID card to vote at the polls. 99.75% of the voters bring that ID. This is only about that 0.25% If they don't bring the ID, how do you handle it? Current law is you sign an affidavit saying, hey, it's really me. The new bill just says, no, you got to either come back with an ID or fax it in or do something to prove you are who you say that you are. That's the only issue. So we're just looking at getting legal advice and advice from the Board of Elections to determine what the right policy is.
But you wanted to make sure that the Board of Elections actually looks at the ID, or your proposal was to have the Board of Elections, people who are working the polls, to look at the signature to see if it matches what is on the registration card.
Yeah, well, not the people working at the polls. It would be actually in the canvass the next day. They would actually compare the signature when the voter signed his provisional ballot and just match that with a voter ID file. It's an easy match. People do it every day in America at checkout counters across the country. It's an easy match. That would have solved the problem. In those rare cases where it didn't match, then you might have potential fraud. Unfortunately, the General Assembly rejected that. Very disappointed. That was the right policy. So now I'm just determining whether I'll sign it or not, and I've got a few more weeks to look at it.
Are you at all concerned about voter fraud? We hear that a lot from Republicans, and there's been the recent arrest and prosecution of many people in Virginia. The state police have an investigation that maybe many as a couple of hundred people involved. So why not get a little tougher at what's going on at the polls?
Well, all those cases had to do with voter registration fraud. This is very different. This is showing up at the poll and saying you're somebody other than who you are. It's a different kind of problem. But I'm very concerned about making sure we have clean, fair, honest elections. At the same time, I want to make sure nobody is unduly burdened or disenfranchised. So it's a very small problem. I mean, the big problem is, as you pointed out, Brian, is all these new cases going back to 2008 of fraud in voter registration with convicted felons or people bundling voter registration forms and improperly turning them in. That's the problem.
So you're saying that most people actually show up to the polls with an ID?
Over 99.75% from all the surveys that we've done in 08 and 09. So it's a very small problem. It's not voter ID. We already have the law. You must show up with a voter ID. This is just about if you don't have it, that 0.25%, how do you handle that administratively?
All right. There was a big meeting at the Department of Transportation yesterday about the Silver Line as it pertains to the second phase of the project, where it goes from Tyson's on out to the Dulles Airport in Loudoun County. There's a hang-up. What is the hang-up? Is it strictly about the labor union issue here?
Well, no, there are multiple
well, let's
issues.
Lay them out.
So I will. First of all, I'm a strong supporter of getting rail to Dulles done on time, on budget, in a transparent, accountable way that's fair to our ratepayers. This is, and as you know, I grew up here in Fairfax County and have seen that corridor grow immensely, and we need to get this done. There are a couple of challenges. One, we don't have any additional resources to put into it now. I committed $150 million as part of the MOA we agreed to with all the stakeholders last year. But here's the challenge. The Metropolitan Washington Airports Authority, who was managing that project, the majority of the votes on that board are controlled by D.C., Maryland, and the federal government, and yet Virginia's paying the majority of the freight. And so I'm concerned about some of the direction. For instance, they had $1 billion in planning overruns, and we just in the last year have cut that from $3.8 to $2.8 billion. This is still one of the largest public works projects in the country, $250 million a mile. We got to make sure this thing is built right, and so we don't have another big dig here in Virginia. So I'm concerned, one, that they have a 10% preference for union labor in the contract. We can't have that. We just passed a bill that I signed saying no PLAs, project labor agreements, on that. We've got to make sure that the tolling authority that they have is done prudently so that we don't exacerbate the toll rates for these folks up here. Thirdly, the bill that President Obama signed in November and I just signed here recently that authorizes 2 more seats in Virginia. We've got to get our members seated. They refuse to seat Virginia members. And so we've got a number of things we've got to work through. But ultimately, the bottom line is this has got to be a transparent, open project where our ratepayers and our toll payers up here and from Virginia have a good deal.
All right. We'll pick up on that a little bit. 8:18 with Brian and Brian. The governor of Virginia is in the house, Bob McDonnell. Thanks for coming in, Governor.
We were talking about the Silver Line, and you actually did meet with the Secretary of Transportation briefly yesterday?
I did. Met with Secretary LaHood for 45 minutes. He has been a great working partner with my Secretary, Sean Connaughton, in trying to solve these problems, cut down the design and the scope to get a project that is affordable, and then work a path forward that we can actually get these problems resolved. Oh, I think so. Listen, I'm committed to the project. We have to get this done. It'll cut down on the congestion on 66, on the Dulles Tollway. It's vitally important to finish this part of the project, but we can't do it in a way that's irresponsible, that really racks up significant toll costs to Virginia ratepayers in the future. So we discussed a path forward, and then all the stakeholders from Loudoun and Fairfax and MWA and the others met after that, and I'm encouraged that we have a way to get there. And then once that happens, then we'll look to see whether there's options for some additional resources to put into the project.
But do you think that the Airports Authority will take out that provision that basically gives an advantage to a contractor who hires labor union to do the job?
Yeah, I'm optimistic that they will. They have to, because it would violate this new Virginia law. It's a huge problem for Loudoun to be able to sign on if that would be left in there. But the big deal is that will ratchet up the cost of the project, which means more tolls have to be paid by Virginians. That's just not acceptable.
I get the impression you guys are a little irritated with the Airport Authority.
Well, we're making progress. We've had a lot of.
Well, hold it. That was diplomatic. I mean, are you irritated with their position on this, and do you have some concerns? I mean, there was even a suggestion by your Secretary of Transportation in the Commonwealth that you might take them out of this mix.
We cannot afford to have a project that's one of the largest in the country not properly managed. That'll hurt the ability to keep tolls down in the future. But we're making progress. We get Virginia's board members seated. There's an IG report coming out in about 2 weeks that will evaluate the management at M1. And I expect there to be some things that are going to have to require immediate corrective action. That's also part of what we need to see, because people have to have confidence that when you got a $250 million a mile project, that it's properly managed and you're not paying tolls unnecessarily. That's my concern. Well, it's got to be done, but it got to be a good deal for the taxpayers.
What is their point of view? Because if Virginia's a right-to-work state, and you guys are throwing your hands up saying, hey, we can't have this here, to have this incentive to hire a pro-union contractor, and we're paying for it, why just take it out? I mean, why are they reluctant to do that?
Well, because I think there are members of the board that are sympathetic to the cause of labor unions.
Are they benefiting from union
Well, they're
labors?
from other states. There's a union executive that is on the board now, but there are people from other states, D.C. and Maryland, that just have a different view. But it's not good for keeping costs down. That's the whole part of this.
Does the Secretary of Transportation, Ray LaHood, know your point of view on this, and does he have enough authority to tell the Airports Authority, look, take this out?
No, he doesn't. I mean, we're all facilitators. The board is appointed by representatives of the federal government, D.C., Maryland, and Virginia, and so each of the executives can have some influence over their own members, but there are some that just believe that this pro-union approach is the way to go. Not only does it, I believe, violate Virginia law, but it ratchets up the cost unnecessarily. So we've already removed a full $1 billion thanks to Secretary Connaughton and LaHood working together. I do believe that there's a new executive director, Jack Potter at MWA. I believe he's got the right vision and leadership. There's going to be some new board members coming up in the near future, and I think once we get that management structure in place, things will get a lot better.
All right, last question on this. The economic impact of rail to Dulles and beyond.
Tremendous.
I mean, granted, it will help in Tysons and out to Reston, but will it is it going to be worth the money, off the billions of dollars that will have been spent to get Dulles out to Metro?
Brian, this decision was made 4 or 5 years ago by previous administrations and others, broadly supported by the business community. You know the choke points along the Dulles Tollway Road, the Greenway, 66, and others. Anything that we can do to alleviate that congestion is helpful. It's not inexpensive to build and widen 66 or others as well. So this was an option that came up, and it'll be, to get from Dulles to downtown and points on Metro is something we really need to get done. So we're way down the road, and we're way past that decision. Federal government's a good partner. They put in about $900 million. Virginia some, Loudoun, Fairfax, the toll payers some. I think there's a financing mechanism in place, and now we just got to make sure it's well run, no cost overruns, get it done on time, and don't unnecessarily jack up the cost of the project. And then that's not too much. That's exactly what people tell me they want.
If there are voters in the Commonwealth of Virginia who are on the bubble about Mitt Romney.
Yes.
And there were some who felt that he wasn't their first choice. They wanted somebody that they perceived to be more conservative. What would you say to them?
I would say to him that, one, I know he's a man of deep principle and faith, who will always endeavor to do the right thing. Now, secondly, is the most important. There's only two issues that matter in this election: it's jobs in the economy, and it's debt and spending. And this president has failed. It's been broken promises. It's been more rhetoric, and really no results on the things that people care about. 8.2% unemployment rate for 39 months. That's unacceptable. We're down to 5.6 in Virginia. Got $1 billion in surpluses. They're going just the opposite way, and the federal government. Mitt Romney's been a proven job creator in the private sector. Secondly, this president's jacked up debt from $10 trillion to $15 trillion and heading north rapidly. That's unacceptable and unsustainable for the future of our country. We're fast becoming a debtor nation. Mitt Romney, when he's governor of Massachusetts, cut a $3 billion deficit, got Massachusetts, a blue state, back on track fiscally, balanced the budget without raising taxes. He can bring that same kind of leadership to Washington, because if we don't restore the fiscal health and the economic health of America, we're going to be in bad shape. And this president has shown that he's not capable of doing it. And then finally, the rhetoric that we've had, hope and change has now become recession and division, separating people by income, by sex. That's not the kind of leadership we need. We need people a leader that'll unite our country and solve problems. And I think Mitt Romney's exactly the guy for this time to do it.
Could you send some guys over to Maryland to help them out? I mean, those of us who live in Maryland are just dying. I mean, it's ridiculous when you compare the way the state of Maryland runs compared to the way the Commonwealth runs.
Well, look, you're nice to do that. It is two different ideas. Martin O'Malley and I are actually friends. We work together regionally on things like Metro and the Chesapeake Bay. But we do have a different idea when it comes to taxes and spending. And look, we're at 5.6% unemployment, $1 billion in surpluses, heading in the right direction, most business-friendly state in the country. So working together on a bipartisan basis, I think we've gotten some good things done.
You're going to be able to build that bridge across the Potomac?
So you can move over a little faster, Brian? Absolutely. Well, we've chatted about it. It's a big project. We need another. It would be nice to have another water crossing, either the east or west of D.C., taking some of that Beltway traffic off of the Beltway. And it's something that our planners continue to talk about.
One last question. Will you endorse a Republican in the race for governor before the primary is over?
Oh, I already have.
Are you?
Oh, yeah. No, I've already long said I'm supporting Bill Bolling. I agreed. 4 years ago, we agreed. Bill supported me. I told him I'd support him this time. But most importantly, he's certainly earned my confidence. He's been the chief jobs creation officer. I've appointed him to that. I've asked him to do a number of other things as a surrogate. For me, he's performed exceptionally well. He's got great temperament. And most importantly, he knows how to get things done, tone down the rhetoric, solve problems. And that's the kind of leadership we need right now.
All right. We got to leave it there. Thanks for coming in, Governor.
Okay, Brian.
Come back
Thank
anytime.
You. Glad to do it.